The wind moaned through the crooked pines, carrying a tune no one had taught it. Soft and eerie, it drifted across the silver lake, ruffling the still surface until it shimmered like a dream just before waking. A small boat rocked gently near the reeds, its paint faded and its ropes dangling loose as though it had been waiting there for many, many years. On the shore, where the grass turned pale beneath the moonlight, a stone statue stood alone. It wasn't a statue of a knight, or a queen, nor even a famous hero from old tales. It was a girl, no older than 12, frozen in the act of reaching for something just out of sight. Her eyes, though made of stone, seemed wide with longing. Moss had begun to creep across her boots, and the hem of her cloak was chipped where the seasons had nibbled at it. But in the crook of her arm, untouched by time, rested a wooden flute, carved with 7 tiny birds. In the trees beyond, something shifted. A creature with fur like midnight paused beside a thorn bush, its golden eyes watching. Then it turned and disappeared into the shadows, silent as breath. Farther up the hill, where moonflowers bloomed even though it was not their season, an ancient tower stood wrapped in vines. No doors, no windows, only a spiral of black stone reaching toward the sky, as if trying to climb back into the stars. From its top, a soft sound echoed into the night, a faint melody, slow and sad, that wound its way through the trees, past the statue, and out across the lake. It was the first of 7 songs, and it had been waiting a long, long time to be heard. In the village of Bell Hollow, just beyond the reach of the Whispering Woods, the children were told never to go near the lake after sunset. The grown-ups never explained why. They only said the water held stories too old for remembering, and that music sometimes echoed when no one was playing. Most listened, but one boy did not. Finley loved stories. Not the ones in books with neat endings and cheerful lessons, but the ones that drifted in the wind, half whispered, half true, waiting to be chased. He had heard the song from the lake only once, on a night when the stars trembled and the moon seemed too large. It had wrapped around his heart like a ribbon and tugged. Since then, he couldn't stop wondering, and wondering always led him to wandering. He crept out of his cottage before dawn, boots tied tight, a scarf tucked into his coat and a satchel across his shoulder. Inside were 3 things: an old lantern, his mother's lullaby locket, and a notebook filled with bits of poems and questions. He followed the path through the woods, careful not to step on dry leaves. The trees leaned in close, like they were listening. The air smelled of moss and cold secrets. When he reached the lake, the sky had just begun to glow. Mist curled above the water, and the small boat still rocked near the reeds. The statue girl stood as he'd seen her in his dreams, one hand stretched out, the wooden flute tucked in her arm. Finley stepped closer. The moment his boot touched the edge of the shore, a single note rang out from the flute. Not played, not blown, just released. Like a sigh, it drifted into the air and faded. The lake rippled once, then stilled. He moved to the statue and reached toward the flute. His fingers brushed the cool wood, and suddenly, the air shifted. The grass flattened in a wide circle around them. From the trees, the black-furred creature reappeared, not with menace, but with watchfulness. Finley froze. The creature blinked once, then turned and began to walk away, pausing now and then to glance back. He understood. It wanted him to follow. They passed the boat, the reeds, the shore where flowers grew upside down, their petals facing the earth. The path twisted toward the tower. As they approached, the wind picked up, and the second song began. It floated from above, higher and lighter than the first, like the laughter of a child who remembers being happy. The tower's vines writhed slightly, curling tighter. Finley stood at the base. No doors, no stairs, just stone and song. The creature lifted its nose, sniffed the air, then scratched at the ground. There, hidden under leaves and roots, was a small, round hole. Big enough for a child, but only just. With a deep breath, Finley crouched and crawled in. The tunnel was damp and smelled of old things, not rot, but memory. As he crawled, the second song grew louder. It wasn't just a tune, it was a feeling. A promise that something could be made right again if only someone was brave enough to try. The tunnel opened into a chamber lit by blue fireflies, their glow dancing across the walls. At the center of the room stood a pedestal. Upon it rested a golden feather, still warm, though no bird had flown there in years. Finley reached out and touched it. The moment he did, the second song ended, and the air stilled. A voice not spoken, but felt whispered through his bones. To break the spell, you must play the 7. Each song belongs to one who waits. Each place holds one heart's sorrow. Find them and play, or remain like stone. He turned. The tunnel behind him had changed. No longer a narrow crawlspace, it had become a spiraling staircase leading upward. With the feather in hand, he climbed. Each step hummed faintly, like strings stretched too tight. The third song began as he reached the next chamber. This one was filled with mirrors, tall and thin, cracked and whole, each reflecting not what was but what could have been. In one, he saw the statue girl running freely through a meadow. In another, he saw her sitting beside a younger brother, teaching him to carve birds from wood. On a stone bench beneath the tallest mirror sat a boy made of mist. He had no face, only eyes like stars, and in his hands he held a music box. Finley stepped forward. The boy turned the key once. The third song played slower now, with deep notes like falling leaves. Regret hummed inside every note. Finley listened, heart aching. He knew what to do. From his satchel, he pulled the locket. He had never opened it before. It had belonged to his mother, who sang only when she thought no one heard. He clicked it open. A soft hum filled the room, the lullaby she used to hum when storms rolled in. The mist boy listened, and as the melody mixed with his own, the mirrors began to melt away. The music box dissolved into light, and the third song ended. The boy vanished, but a carved bird made of glass and light was left behind. Finley tucked it into his satchel and continued up the stairs. The fourth chamber was cold. Snow drifted from the ceiling, though no sky was above. A tree stood at its center, bare and twisted, with icicles hanging like tears. Beneath it sat an old woman, her hair white as frost, her cloak stitched with frost flowers. Her eyes were closed. In her lap lay a harp missing most of its strings. She opened her eyes without surprise. Though her mouth did not move, Finley felt her sadness. The fourth song rose around them, slow and tired, as though even sound struggled to move through the cold. Finley knelt beside her and showed her the golden feather. She nodded and placed it where a harp string should have been. Light sparked, and a single string shimmered into being. She plucked it. The note was pure and strong. A second string grew, then a third. With each note, warmth returned. The snow began to melt. The woman grew younger with every chord until she was no longer a crone but a girl no older than Finley. She placed the harp in his arms and vanished, leaving behind a small flame that danced without burning. He added it to the satchel. The fifth and sixth songs came quicker. One in a room filled with floating lanterns, where he had to sing back a melody made of lost wishes. Another in a field of sleeping foxes, where he danced beneath stars that changed color with every step. Each time he played, he gave a piece of his heart, not lost, but shared. In return, he received another carved bird and another spark of light. At last, he reached the top of the tower. The final room was silent. There, in a circle of moonlight, stood the statue girl no longer of stone, but of shadow and echo, as though she were not fully there. She looked at him, and the seventh song began, but it was broken, just fragments, scattered like leaves in the wind. She could not remember the whole. Finley stepped forward and placed the 6 birds around her feet. One by one they began to hum, each singing their own song. He reached for the flute she still carried. As his fingers closed around it, it warmed in his hand. The notes rose not just from the flute, but from the memories he carried. His mother's lullaby, the boy's music box, the girl's harp, the lanterns and fox dance and firelight. All 7 songs became one. He lifted the flute to his lips and played. The first note trembled in the air like a candle flickering in wind. Then the second, clearer, steadier. By the third, the room had changed. The walls of the tower shimmered, and the shadows that clung to the corners peeled away like dark petals. The girl, still part shadow and part memory, stepped back as the carved birds rose from the floor. Their wings unfurled, though they did not fly. They hovered in place, circling slowly, as if waiting for something to be completed. Finley's fingers moved over the flute's wooden surface, and the melody came not from memory, but from something deeper, something felt rather than known. It wasn't a song he had learned. It was one that had always been waiting inside him. The fourth note echoed like the chime of a faraway bell, and with it, the vines that wrapped the tower began to loosen, slithering downward like ropes being lowered. The girl flinched. Her hands flew to her chest as if trying to hold something in place, something that was beginning to rise against her will. Finley kept playing. The fifth note rang like a silver thread pulled taut, and suddenly, the stone tower groaned. Not in pain, but in release. As if something trapped for years had finally found a crack to slip through. The carved birds circled faster. The shadows around the girl grew lighter, and her feet, which had not touched the ground fully until now, began to settle. Then came the sixth note. This one shook the floor. Not violently, but with purpose. The kind of shaking that came before awakening. The girl cried out not with her voice, for she had none, but with her presence. A wave of emotion surged outward, washing over Finley like cold water: fear, sorrow, guilt, and underneath it, something else. A quiet, desperate hope. Finley's breath caught. His fingers hovered over the flute. Only one note left. One song left to complete. But he could feel it now, how heavy this final note was. Not just a sound, a choice. One that could not be undone. He looked at the girl. She had eyes the color of stormlight, and now he saw what had been hidden beneath the spell. Not just sorrow, not just longing, but a memory of a mistake. A choice she had once made, long ago, to try and stop something terrible. And in doing so, had been trapped inside the very magic she sought to control. This was not just a spell of silence. It was a punishment, a price. She had broken something, perhaps even herself, to protect someone else. And now, her song was the only key to her freedom. But it would come at a cost. The golden-furred creature stepped into the circle. Its eyes met Finley's. Not a warning, a question. Was he ready? He closed his eyes. Then he played the seventh note. It was unlike the others. It rang like a sunrise breaking through storm clouds, like the first laugh after tears. It was not loud, but it filled everything. It filled the tower, the sky, the stone, the lake beyond. It filled the girl's eyes. And it broke the spell. A sudden silence crashed down, heavier than any sound. The carved birds dropped to the ground and shattered, not with violence, but with peace, like raindrops finally touching earth. The vines fell away completely. The moonlight vanished. In its place, sunlight streamed through new windows that hadn't been there before. Warm, golden, alive. The girl gasped. It was the first sound she had made in 100 years. Color bloomed across her skin. The shadows peeled away from her arms and hair. She blinked, stepped forward, and touched Finley's hand. She was no longer made of stone or echo or shadow. She was real. The creature bowed. The tower walls sighed, like an old house finally able to rest. But Finley, he could no longer move. The flute in his hands had turned to glass. His fingers, still curled around it, were stiff, cold. His feet were rooted to the floor, not by force, but by choice. A quiet trade. The final note had called for truth, and Finley's truth was this. He had given his voice to awaken hers. The music had not come from a spell, but from his own heart. And the seventh note had needed something pure, something real. And so, it had taken what he had offered freely, his voice, his music. But in return, the girl was free. She knelt beside him, tears running down her cheeks. She pressed a hand to his heart. It still beat, strong and steady. He was not gone, only changed. Then, softly, she began to hum. Not the seventh song, but the first. The one he had heard that night, when the wind had moaned through the pines and stirred the lake. And as she hummed, the birds that had shattered rose once more, not as carvings, but as real creatures, with feathers and warmth and eyes that sparkled like stars. They flew around Finley in a circle, lifting him gently, like wind lifting a leaf. The girl sang, and though he could not sing with her, Finley smiled.